Hey Cyberspace, Nathan Wallace coming at you from the Cyberical Engineering offices outside New Orleans, Louisiana, with another cyberware tip of the day. Today's topic is least privilege. Basically, you don't want to give everybody the keys to the kingdom. If this key grants access to one thing, this key grants access to another thing, this key grants access to another thing, but this person only needs access to these two things, why do they have this key, right? So there's no reason for it. So the idea of least privilege, it's really, in practice, we look at this as far as RBAC, or role-based access control. You can apply this in the context of any type of information technology, communications type infrastructure. But in the context of, let's say, a control center, SCADA, supervisor control data acquisition, or ICS, also industrial control systems. But more specifically in the context of a power system, where let's say it's a substation or a power plant, you really have to have those design engineers, professionally licensed engineers, do this type of configuration because it has to be in the context of the application. But anyway, so inside of a substation, so let's say that this is our substation or a power plant, right? So it can be either one. You're going to have relays. So these are protection relays. This is an example right here. So you have your relays, you have your RTU, or remote terminal unit. So this allows that SCADA to kind of come down, talk, and control those devices inside the substation or inside the power plant. And then we have our communication switch. So this is just some, layer 2, layer 3 network switch. And then we have a firewall. Sadly, these aren't used as often as they could be or should be. Even then, once they are used, they have to be configured properly, right? So let's say the way this works, so RBAC, role-based access control, we have basically roles. So we have an engineer, technician role, IT role, and then of course our famous CEO role. And then we have devices over here, like I just mentioned. And then there's the user table, right? So our list of users, we have Joe, Ted, Sally, and Bill. And then this is the designation as far as what they are allowed to do. So read access and then write access. So let's go through this. So let's say Bill is our CEO. And the question is Bill going to have the keys to go in and make these configuration changes, the read and write inside the substation, inside the power plant, when that's not his daily job, right? Should he be given access to do that? Obviously no. So sorry, CEO Bill, you don't have access to do that, right? So let's look at the engineer Joe. So Joe over here, he's our engineer. And let's say, okay, during commissioning, testing, design, he needs to go in there, do some settings changes, some configuration changes. So yeah, he definitely needs read access, right? Because once he makes those changes, he has to read them back, as well as debugging, as well as write. So read and write. The relays, RTU, absolutely. He needs to be able to configure and test, to make sure that RTU and that relay can talk to each other, make sure those point maps are set and aligned properly. The switch, so this is that communication switch. A lot of times it depends, right? In some cases the engineer is the responsible party. Other times it's just that IT. So there are cases where IT has that designation to go in and work on the communications. But just because when we look at things like the more sophisticated protocols like 61850 that are really domain specific to the power industry, when the traditional back office IT guy, he may not understand or be able to configure that properly, right? So let's go ahead and leave this here. But, the IT guy, he at least needs to be able to read those firewall rules. But then, of course, the IT guy, he should be able to read and write the firewall. And, just for grins, let's say the engineer messes up and the IT guy wants to see what the configuration was on the switch. So, yeah, he also is going to have the read and write privilege. And then, let's say the RTU. Would he need access to the RTU? Maybe, if the RTU is sending events and alarms over to some SOC, Security Operations Center, let's say some SIM that's in the SOC, so SIM, Security Information Event Management System. So maybe, let's just say it's a read, because when you get into your RTU, a lot of these RTUs, they're not just communication devices. They're not just protocol converters. They're actually full-fledged substation automation controllers, right? They can control open breakers, send the commands. So let's keep that, as far as the engineer goes. Now let's look at the relays. Obviously no, right? He doesn't need access to that. Technician. Technician will likely go in, let's say during an event, let's say a weather event, some weird fault, all the fires in California, and he's basically going to look at the relay data. So he's probably only going to need read access to all this stuff, and he may not even need to access the firewall, right? Why have access to the firewall? Maybe as far as, let's say he's looking at event logs. Okay, so it's just read. And what's nice is whenever you do this type of stuff, whenever you use a technology like LDAP or Radius, you can actually set these roles dynamically. So during an emergency, he may be graduated to the engineer role to be able to make some changes, and then all of a sudden, let's remove him, and he goes back to his default role. So this is very interesting, right, as far as what can happen, what's possible, but it takes, once again, engineering, it takes proper integration, it takes proper documentation. But what's nice is it does create that audit trail, needed for compliance to say, okay, once they get access, what did they do? Who had access at that time, or at least that level of access? So hopefully this is helpful. For more tips and tricks, check out staysafeonline.org, or you can check out our website, cyberical.com, cyber safely.